everyone, and welcome to the root cellar presentation. This presentation will show you exactly how to put your vegetables in a container. There's 3 containers on the side over there. One on the right is a flat container with carrots in it and has sawdust. That's what you're supposed to put your carrots in, sawdust. The middle container has potatoes, onions, and beets. They need to be covered with paper so there's no light getting at it. And the one on the left is for squashes. And when you store a squash, you have to have a stem on it, because if you take the stem off, it'll rot right away. So to start with, we're going to get into, can everybody see that screen? This is the introduction. The term root cellar, as we are using it here, included the whole range of vegetable saving techniques from hillside caves to garden trenches. The traditional root cellar is an underground storage space for vegetables and fruit. You know, we also put jams and stuff like that in the root cellar too, and canned goods. Wherever space is permitted. They are dug into a hill and lined with brick, stone, or concrete. Dirt floored or insulated basement rooms. Somewhat less picturesque, but probably more numerous, are also traditional. These are some pictures I took in Sullivan County about some root cellars that are in the area. There's one you're going to love at the end. This one has a wood top on it, but I guarantee you that top wooden area is quite insulated, really heavily. This one is really a true root cellar. Now here's the funniest one coming up, right there. Somebody put a school bus in the ground and turned it into a root cellar. Okay, now, pardon me?
Is that local?
Yeah.
Really?
That's local. That's up in Parksville, believe it or not. Now, planning your root cellar. Temperature should be your first consideration. So you'll need a thermostat. Ventilation is the second most important thing. Some root cellars have a window, which I don't think is a good thing. Louvered ventilation, exhaust pipes, and so on. A temperature between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit is excellent. A temperature range of 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit will still permit shorter term storage of root vegetables and apples, and will keep onions and some of the shorter lived storage vegetables like peppers, tomatoes, and eggplant in good shape for a month or so. The best spot for a basement root cellar is on the northeast side, where sun influence is the weakest. Most root cellars are dug into a north face hill or are underground on the north coolest side of the house. My particular root cellar, which you'll see, you'll learn some reasons why you do things and you don't do things. I learned by trying. In a basement vegetable closet, which is mine, it is important to keep out the heat from the furnaces, warming pipes, and heating ducts. Insulation is a prior factor in building a root cellar. Humidity, high humidity, is the second requirement for effective storage. Root crops and leafy vegetables keep best at a humidity of 90 to 95%. To keep crops from shriveling up. You can purchase a hydrometer at any hardware store to keep in there. And basement root cellars are most likely than dug-in root cellars that need more humidity. Things you do in a root cellar. Keep fruits and vegetables in small piles, not heaped in large amounts, which you'll see some pictures of that. Store your best sound, unbruised, and mature crops, the healthiest ones. That's what you want in the root cellar. Harvest storage produce in cold weather when the soil is dry. Keep containers of vegetables raised several inches above the floor. Air can circulate around them. Well, you'll see some pictures when I show you the construction of a root cellar, that it must be your first shelf must be at least 10 inches off the floor. Pack root vegetables in sand, like the one over there is packed in sawdust. We use that for either carrots, rutabagas and stuff like that. They're packed in sand. Pack root vegetables in sand or sawdust that's damp. You're going to have to dampen that sawdust just a little bit, not too soggy. Don't. Pick your vegetables, let them dry from the sun. Do not wash them. Don't put vegetables on bare concrete floor. Don't store insect damaged, bruised, or immature produce. Don't store stemless squash or pumpkins like you'll see over there. Those squash over there, they have little stems on, and it keeps the top of that squash from rotting. Don't feel badly if you lose a couple things from now and then to spoilage. Good keepers: beets, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. When we get the Brussels sprouts and cabbage, you pick it from the garden with the roots and all. You put it in your root cellar, and if you don't have a bin, you hang it upside down in a root cellar so the roots are up, and it keeps them fresh. I've had Brussels sprouts and cabbage in there right until May. Carrots, like I said, should go in sawdust or sand. Cauliflower, you could hang. Celery, I never put celery in a root cellar because it never lasted. Collards are good. Kale is good. Kohlrabi, leeks, onions, parsnips. They should all be covered with newspaper so light does not get at them. Winter squash, like I said before, you have to have a stem on them. And turnips, you leave the top on. When you pick it, you don't cut the tops off. You leave it on. Okay. This is how you do not store vegetables, in buckets like this, because they will surely rot. But these are some of the containers you could use as long as you use the newspaper and so on. Like I said before, you can put jams and jellies and so on in there. This is my root cellar, starting with Dave's kitchen. Okay, this is the inside of my root cellar. You will notice that the ceiling here is arched, okay? And these are the storage containers that I have used for years and years and years. Now, this section over here on the right, that pole there, I usually hang cabbage and stuff like that. Now, this one, you'll see those things growing in the back. That's potatoes. I did that on purpose so you could see if you don't cover your potatoes with newspaper, they're going to grow, and that's no good. Okay, now we're going to get into construction of the root cellar. This is really, really important. Airflow. Airflow, you have to bring in a pipe from the outside. If your roof is up here, the pipe has to come down, has to go into the root cellar. It's probably 4 inches round. Then you have an outlet here for the gases from the vegetables. They have to breathe, and it has to have good ventilation. You will also notice that between here and that shelf is 3 inches. And ventilation, nothing can touch either wall anywhere. This is a floor plan of a root cellar. This root cellar is 8 feet by 10 feet, 2 by 6 walls, okay? You'll notice from the wall to the first shelf is 3 inches. The bottom shelf is actually 10 inches up off the floor. We have 4 shelves in my root cellar. They're about 22.5 inches apart. The ventilation in my root cellar is up here going out and comes in through the side wall, down and out under here. This is a elevation of the root cellar of mine. You'll notice that this is a basement root cellar because these are my ceiling joists in the basement. Then I made an arched ceiling. All this is insulated with about R33 insulation. Then I have a pipe coming from outside. From this point up, it's exposed outside. It's the concrete block. So I have the ventilation coming in, down, and out the bottom, comes to this wall, circulates, and the vent goes out the top. It releases all the gases. Being 8 foot by 10 foot, you would put the door in the center so you have the same amount of ventilation on both sides when you open that door. This ceiling in here is actually 1/2 inch hardboard. It's made out of concrete, and I had to score it to bend it. My intention over the years when it went by was to tile that, but I never had the time. I got too busy doing other things. I have booklets here for anyone who wants one. Shows you everything that I just showed you. Now, I want to see if I could get back here. And thank you. That's the presentation. Was that too fast? Any questions? Does anybody on Zoom have a question?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I'd like to do a root cellar in my crawl space under my house. But I'm not sure how I could do that ventilation. Is that really critical to have the cold air and have that circulation?
On the north side, because the north side will always push air into your vents, and it'll circulate in the root cellar, come up and vent out the gases from your vegetables.
Okay.
When you pick your vegetables, like I had said before, you can look in those boxes over there. When you pick potatoes, you put them in the sun, let them dry, you don't wet them, and you put them with brush the dirt off a little bit after they're dry, and then put them in that container, and then you put newspaper on top of them. If you don't, they'll grow and they won't last long at all. Root cellars are really quite easy to deal with. They really are. It's a lot of fun. Mine is about 25 years old, and we use it quite a bit.
If I want to
The
keep my
things that spoiled quickest on me in a root cellar was like spaghetti squash, because spaghetti squash has a tremendous amount of moisture in it, and it didn't last as long as like butternut squash or acorn squash. Butternut squash and acorn squash last the longest. I had them right up until May. Okay. Apples, when you choose apples for your root cellar, you have to pick a long-term hardy apple. You just can't put any apples in there. Like I've tried Macintosh and they didn't last as long because they're not a hardy apple. Things like cabbage and Brussels sprouts, as long as you hang them with the roots, they'll last a very, very long time. And to be honest with you, they taste sweeter come around Christmas time. It's really, really wonderful.
You don't need newspapers then for the cabbage?
No, because you're pulling the cabbage out of the ground with the roots still attached,
Okay.
and you're going to hang them in a root cellar on a hook. And it keeps it fresh.
And the newspaper, is that just keeping it dark?
The newspapers keep it dark, doesn't let light in, and it doesn't feel the breeze from the circulation in there. There's a tiny bit of breeze in a root cellar. But root cellars have been going on forever. And I don't know if you like the one with the schoolhouse, but or the school bus, but that's something Parksville. That was something to see.
Is that still being used?
It's still being used, but it's covered over now. You know, they finished covering the roof and everything over with dirt. It's amazing going in there. God. Any other questions anybody have?
Yeah, I wanted to continue with one last question. If there's a
Kale,
map,
if you could pull it out by the roots and hang it, cabbage, kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, very good. And potatoes, man, they'll last me right into June if I have enough, because I keep them covered. Well, you saw what happened in that photograph there. If they're not covered, they start growing and they lose their strength, and it's not good. So I hope everybody enjoyed it.
I have another question. I didn't finish.
I have a question. What kinds of things have you done that have proven to be mistakes that you've learned from?
Is the audio done?
Shall I ask that again? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I don't hear the speaker, but I hear you.
Okay, good. You heard my question.
Yes, it's a good question.
Okay. But I don't hear
But I
the
can't
speaker
answer it.
anymore. Oh, the host is muted. I see that.
The host left.
The host is muted. There.
Either of you have root cellars?
Ask her the question.
Can you ask me the question again, please?
Yes. What kinds of things have you done that have proven to be mistakes that you've learned from?
Okay, celery is for one. String beans you can't keep in a root cellar too long. But obviously, wax beans keep longer than string beans. I have no idea why, but they do. But I don't put any beans in my root cellar anymore, or spinach. Or, yes, I do put garlic, but garlic has to be on a drying rack. Garlic cannot touch each other. It has to be on a drying rack, and I have a drying rack in my root cellar. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions on Zoom?
Can you use plastic bins instead of wooden bins? And can you cover the vegetables with some plastic instead of newspaper?
No, plastic is no good because it causes condensation, and that's bad because the product will get damp.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Amy had a question also, which is a very good question. How do you keep mice out of your root cellar? First of all, when your vent comes in from the exterior, you're going to have to put like a screen on it so nothing can get in. And the same with the exterior vent. That's the only way you're going to keep mice out.
You can ask your question. Say it, ask it.
How do you,
When you dry the garlic,
when you're using a drying rack, can it be metal or does it have to be wood?
It has to be wood, and it's usually out of pine. And the racks are spaced about 4 inches apart, and they slide in and out. And along with those drying racks, you can put some apples on there if you feel you're going to use them, say, in a month or so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions from Zoom? Any other questions here? Yes, ma'am.
How do you keep the squirrel, the winter residents out of keep from eating
I couldn't hardly hear you.
How do you keep the squirrels and all from eating your crop in the root cellar?
They can't get in the root cellar because of my door, plus the vents are sealed and they can't get in. Not even mice can get in. But I tell you, if you don't take care of that vent and put something over it, you'll get them, because I've had them in my root cellar. It's amazing. Now, also, One other thing you probably all know, but when you have a vegetable garden, you must pick mature fruit. Don't go in your garden and say, look at a butternut squash and it's still greenish. Don't pick it. You have to let it get older until it gets that nice dark pink. And when you pick it, you have to have at least 2 or 3 inches of vine still hanging to it, or it'll rot quite away. So. Any other questions?
So Dave, on the pipe, when you're gonna try to keep the creatures out, you need something stronger than screen, like hardware cloth or something. like-
Hardware cloth is good. That's what I have on mine, 1/4 inch hardware cloth, and I used one of those bands you use for a dryer vent, and I screw that on there to keep them out. But it's amazing how they try and get in there.